She didn't cry when she said it, just looked at me square, dust on her cheek and shame buried deep in her voice. "I can't give you children," she said. I leaned back in my saddle, stared past her to the dying sun. "Then give me your heart," I said. "The rest don't matter." I reckon she didn't believe me, not right then anyway. She blinked once, slow like a lizard on a rock, then turned her face away as if the sun stung too hard. Truth was, it wasn't the sun, it was hope. Hope's got a sharper bite than anything else out on the plains. I met her outside of Dry Creek, a town too proud of its name for how little water ran through it. She was hauling fence rails off a broken wagon, alone, sleeves rolled to the elbows and a wide-brimmed hat shielding a face that didn't ask for compliments, strong jaw, chapped lips, eyes the color of cold tea left too long on a windowsill. I didn't stop to be chivalrous. I was just hungry and headed toward the post. But something about the way she moved, deliberate, quiet, like she wasn't counting on help from anyone, made me pull up my horse. "You need a hand?" I asked, not expecting a yes. She didn't even look up. "If you want something in return, ride on." I laughed, not out of insult, but out of recognition. I'd said the same damn thing to a stranger once. Got me a black eye and a friend that stuck longer than most. "I'm just passing through. Thought maybe 2 arms were better than 1. She paused, looked at me, the kind of look that scans for weakness, not charm. Then she nodded once and handed me a rail. We built fence in silence. Sun dropped lower. Sweat gathered in the smalls of our backs. She didn't speak until the last rail hit the dirt. Then she wiped her brow with a threadbare cloth and said it like she was telling me the price of beans. "I can't give you children." I don't know why it hit me the way it did. Maybe because no one says something like that unless the world's made it a wound. Or maybe because the way she stood, all grit and bone and tired pride, reminded me of myself more than I liked admitting. "Then give me your heart," I said. "The rest don't matter." I waited for the scoff, for her to say I was a fool or a liar. But she just squinted toward the horizon and said, "I've heard that before." "I ain't him." "I didn't say you were," she replied. We stood in the fading light like two strangers on the edge of something, a cliff or a new beginning, hard to tell which. She finally held out her hand. "Ruth." "Eli. Don't soap hard doubles. Well, soap hard of Renian doubles of Wysand of Wall of Wise, 60s, and from." We didn't shake, just nodded like two folks who knew names were more binding than most folks realized. "You got a place to sleep, Eli?" she asked, voice even. "No, but I've slept colder places." She jerked her head toward a half-built shack near the wagon. "I got beans. Ain't much, but they're warm." I dismounted, and we walked side by side without touching. The sky turned purple and blue above us, and coyotes howled like ghosts that miss the living. Inside the shack, the walls were mostly up, roof halfway nailed. A fire crackled in a stone ring, and a pot hung above it, hissing gentle steam. She handed me a tin cup, and I sat cross-legged, grateful for heat. "Where you headed?" she asked. "Nowhere fast." She nodded like that made sense. "Me neither." We ate, quiet again, but not the same quiet as before. This one had weight to it, shared silence, the kind that says maybe you found someone who doesn't mind being still with you. I asked nothing about her past. She offered nothing. We talked about weather, the land, how beans can taste better when you're not trying to impress anyone. And then, just before sleep took us, me on a blanket near the door, her curled by the embers, she whispered, "They said I was worthless, that a woman who can't bear children is a mouth without purpose." I didn't answer right away, didn't want to say something too soft, too fast. "My wife died 5 years ago," I said. "She was pregnant. Fever took 'em both." I heard her shift slightly. Wood creaked, wind slipped through the cracks. "So you know what it feels like," she said. "Yeah," I said. "I know." Neither of us spoke again that night, but the wind didn't feel as cold anymore. In the morning, I saddled up, expecting to ride on like I always did, but she walked out holding a tin of biscuits wrapped in cloth. "Case of staying. For the trail," she said. I took them, touched the brim of my hat, started to turn my horse, then stopped. "I got a claim west of here, little place near Twin Falls. Cabin's solid, barn's halfway rebuilt." She raised a brow. "You offering me work?" she asked. I smiled. "No, I'm offering you breakfast tomorrow, and maybe the next day too." She didn't answer, just stared at me with that same dusty strength. "I'll think on it," she said. "Good. I'll be back in 3 days either way. If you're there, we'll talk more. If not, well then I'll eat the biscuits and ride on." I turned my horse and rode into the rising sun, the biscuits heavy in my saddlebag, and something I hadn't felt in a long time settling under my ribs. Yelp. The kind you don't ask for, but feel lucky as hell to stumble into. 3 days later, I came back like I said I would. The land between Twin Falls and Dry Creek wasn't much. A stretch of dust, scrub brush, and the kind of silence that makes you start talking to your horse just to feel like you're not alone. But that morning, it felt different. I was riding toward something instead of away from it. When I crested the last rise and saw the shack, I slowed. Smoke curled up from the chimney, slow, steady, like someone was boiling coffee or burning off the morning chill. There was a horse tied out front, not mine. Looked like a pack animal, half-starved and missing a shoe. I narrowed my eyes, watching. Then I saw her. Ruth was crouched by the wagon, stacking wood, same worn hat, same quiet focus. But this time, she turned before I even called out and nodded like she'd been expecting me. "You're late," she said. I checked the sky. I said 3 days. "This is the fourth sunrise." I grinned. "Well, if I knew you were counting, I'd have ridden faster." She tossed a piece of wood into the pile. "You bringing me to that cabin, or you just here to talk about breakfast?" I dismounted, took the biscuits from my saddlebag, what was left of them anyway, and held up the bundle. "Still warm, ear." She didn't smile, but her eyes softened just a hair. "You sure about this?" "Only thing I've been sure of in a long time." She stood up, brushed her hands on her skirt. "Then let's go." We rode quiet for the first few miles, same as before. Only difference was, she wasn't just some stranger on the trail anymore. She rode steady, straight-backed, like she belonged to the land. Like she'd outlast it if it tried to shake her loose. When we reached the edge of my property, the wind picked up. Twin Falls wasn't much more than 2 stone ridges where water trickled down after rain. The cabin sat between 2 hills, tucked under a cottonwood that creaked when it got lonely. "Not bad," Ruth said, looking it over. "I built it myself. Trees, tang, combat day, pull, new." She raised an eyebrow. "Mostly. Just and two, how that." She didn't ask questions, just tied up her horse, walked the perimeter, and checked the structure like a man checking a fence line. I stood back and let her. Something about the way she moved said she needed to know it was solid before she let herself settle. By dusk, she was unpacking. "I sleep in the loft," I said. "You can take the bed." She gave me a look that could peel paint. "I'm not here for charity." "I didn't say you were, just figured you'd want the warmer spot." She paused. "We share the space. Even." "Even," I agreed. That night, we ate rabbit stew and drank strong coffee. We didn't talk much, but it wasn't the awkward kind of quiet. It was the kind where 2 people know there's no need to fill the space just to prove they're alive. It took her a few days to settle in. I never asked her to cook or clean or do anything really, but she did. She fixed the stovepipe, patched a hole in the roof, even stitched one of my shirts without asking. "I don't need to be taken care of," I told her one morning. She didn't look up from her stitching. Neither do I. Spring settled in slower than usual. Snow stuck to the hills well into March, and the creek out back ran cold and shallow. Supplies ran tight, but we managed. Shared work, shared silence, shared warmth. One morning, I found her out back feeding chickens I hadn't known we had. "Where'd you get those?" Traded some stitching for eggs. Lady down at the ridge. Jay. I watched her for a while, her breath steaming in the morning chill, her hands gentle and sure. You thinking about staying? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Oh, then, I never left. We didn't speak of love, not in the way most folks do. There were no poems or promises, just the steady rhythm of two lives moving in the same direction. We learned each other's habits, how I liked my coffee black, how she hummed when she chopped vegetables, how I kept a picture of my wife folded in my Bible. She never asked me to put it away. I never asked her who she cried for when she thought I was asleep. One afternoon, a rider came up from the south. Dusty hat, red nose, the smell of whiskey trailing behind him like bad luck. Name was Cal Weaver. I knew him from town, ran the general store, and ran his mouth harder. He spotted Ruth before he spotted me. Well, I'll be, he said, spitting to the side. Didn't think you'd land yourself a woman, Eli, much less that one. I stepped out onto the porch, arms folded. Morning, Cal. He nodded at me but kept his eyes on Ruth. Ain't she the one who got thrown out by the Moors? Shame about her womb. Pretty face, though, waist of a good shape. Ruth didn't flinch, just stood there with a basket of kindling in her arms, eyes hard as river stones. I stepped down. You come out here for trade, or to get your teeth loosened. Cal raised his hands. Didn't mean offense, just making conversation. Then pick a different one, I said. We don't host cowards here. He looked between us, smirked, and turned his horse. Suit yourself, Eli. But folks are talking. You keep her around too long, they'll say you've gone soft. I didn't answer, just watched him ride off until the dust settled. Ruth turned to go inside. You all right? I asked. She paused. That's the kind of man who thinks worth lives between a woman's hips. And I'm the kind that knows better. She didn't smile, but her shoulders relaxed, and that night she touched my hand for the first time. Not out of need, out of choice. I don't know exactly when it happened. That quiet shift from sharing a space to sharing a life. No line drawn in the sand, no vow spoken, just 100 little moments stitched together until they formed something too solid to break. She started humming more. I started waking before the sun just to hear her start the fire. We never said I love you. We didn't have to. Love ain't always loud. Sometimes it just sits beside you, hands calloused, eyes steady, asking for nothing but your presence. But the world don't leave good things untouched. It always circles back around, testing the seams for weakness. It started with the preacher. Old man Carrick was built like a fence post, thin and upright, face carved by wind and judgment. He showed up one Sunday afternoon without warning, wearing his Sunday coat and carrying a Bible big enough to crush a chicken. I was splitting logs behind the barn when I heard his boots crunch the gravel. "Morning, Eli," he said, tipping his hat. "Preacher," I said, wiping my brow. "Didn't expect a visit." I make it a point to check in on folks living out of town, especially when they've got company. He didn't say her name, didn't have to. His eyes did the pointing. Ruth came out from the cabin holding a basket of herbs. She nodded at him, polite but cool. "Ruth," he said, with that tight smile he always wore when he wasn't sure whether to preach or scold. "You thirsty, preacher?" I asked. "We got cold water." "I won't stay long," he said, ignoring the offer. "Just wanted to remind you both about Sunday service. Town's been wondering. Folks talk when a man stops showing up with his Bible." "I talk to God fine out here," I said. "Maybe. But some are wondering if you're living in sin." Ruth didn't flinch. She just said, "Let 'em wonder. They don't feed our stove." Carrick looked like he'd swallowed a beetle. "It's not just talk. The Moors are stirring trouble. They don't like seeing her kept, Eli. Says it sets a bad example." "She's not kept," I said. "She's my partner." The word hung in the air. He didn't like it. Too modern, too even. The preacher liked order. Men leading, women birthing, God watching like a schoolmaster. He tapped his Bible. "It's not too late to do things properly. I Jew are." I stepped forward, not hostile, but close enough to make a point. Preacher, if you came all this way to call her a sin, you can turn that mule around and ride back to town. He hesitated, then tipped his hat again, more out of habit than respect. I'll pray for you both. We watched him leave. Later that night, Ruth stirred stew while I cleaned my rifle on the porch. The sun set slow. She didn't say anything about the preacher. I figured she wouldn't. But then she came out, wiping her hands on her apron. You regret it? She asked. I looked up. What? This. Us. Not being proper. I set the rifle down, looked her in the eye. I'd regret letting the world tell me what love looks like. She nodded, sat beside me. The warmth of her shoulder against mine was answer enough. But the preacher was right about one thing. The Moors weren't done. 3 days later, Ruth went into town alone, just to get flour and thread. I stayed behind a mend fence after a small herd wandered through the southern field. She left early and promised to be back by noon. By sundown, I was pacing. I saddled up and rode hard. When I reached the trading post, the clerk said she'd come and gone, but looked spooked. She didn't say much, he told me, just left fast, real fast. I rode the main street, then checked behind the stables. Found her sitting on the ground beside her horse, hands shaking, eyes distant. She looked up when she heard my boots. You all right? I asked, crouching down. She didn't answer, just looked at her hands. They spit at me in the street. I waited. Moore's boy, the big one, said I was cursed. Said you'd be better off marrying a pig, at least that way you'd get piglets. I clenched my jaw so tight my teeth ached. I didn't hit him, she said. Didn't even look at him, just walked. You shouldn't have had to. I'm used to it. I am used to it. That was the part that broke me, not the insult, not the spit. The way she said, I'm used to it, like it was weather. I helped her up, got her in the saddle. We rode home in silence. But that night, after she went to sleep, I sat by the fire with my rifle in my lap. I didn't ride to the Moore's place, not that night, but I did ride into town the next morning, right into the saloon. Moore's son, Jed, was there, bragging loud, laughing harder, talking about barren women like they were broken tools. I walked straight up behind him and cracked the butt of my rifle across the back of his knees. He hit the floor hard, his drink spilling across his vest. Before he could rise, I spoke. You say one more word about that woman, and I will put you in the ground so fast your soul won't have time to catch up. He spat blood, reached for his belt. I cocked the rifle. The whole saloon went still. You think I'm scared of you? He said. No, I said. I think you're too stupid to understand mercy. Then I lowered the rifle and walked out. Didn't shoot him. Didn't need to. The town knew. That woman, Ruth, was mine, and I was hers. No paper, no preacher, but something stronger than either. We didn't talk about what happened in town. Not for days. Ruth moved a little slower, a little quieter, like she was sorting the pieces of something no one else could see. I gave her space, but I stayed close, worked the fence line in longer stretches, fixed the chicken coop even though it didn't need fixing. Just kept busy, like maybe if I moved fast enough, the shame wouldn't settle in her bones. But shame's a stubborn thing. It don't care if you earned it or not. One night, we were sitting out back, watching the sky peel open to stars. She was wrapped in a wool blanket, legs tucked under her, staring out at the dark like it owed her something. Do you ever wish she'd lived? She asked. It caught me off guard. My wife, I said. She nodded, eyes on the horizon. I thought about lying, but Ruth hated lies more than loneliness. Sometimes, I said, not because I loved her more, just different. That life died with her. Sometimes I wonder what kind of man I would have been if it hadn't. She was quiet for a while. Then, I would have made a terrible mother. Jawed knee. I turned to her. Don't say that. It's true. I get restless. I don't sing. I don't like small talk. I don't even know how to tell stories without making them sad. Maybe kids don't need lullabies and sunshine, I said. Maybe they just need truth and hands that don't shake. She looked down at her fingers, strong, weathered, hands that built, that healed, that never once trembled in front of me, even when the world spat in her face. I wanted to want it, she said. The crib, the dresses, all of it. But I never did. And when I found out I couldn't, it was like God just rubber-stamped what I already feared. And what was that? That I was born wrong. Checked. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. The stars above us didn't blink. They just burned. You ever think maybe God don't make wrong people? Just wrong expectations? She didn't answer, but her hand found mine, and we stayed like that until the fire burned low. The next week, she built shelves. She didn't say why, just started measuring, cutting, fitting planks along the cabin's back wall. I offered to help. She shook her head. I need to do this one myself. Now I need to do this one. Yay, I let her. By the time she finished, the wall held rows of jars, pickles, dried herbs, beans, and a strange little wooden box in the center with nothing in it. I pointed to it once. She said, "Hope." I never asked again. Spring turned to summer. The creek swelled, then dried. We planted corn and lost half of it to wind. Coyotes took 2 hens, but we caught one in a snare and made stew out of him. Ruth laughed for the first time in weeks when I burnt the bread. Then one morning, I found her on the porch steps, clutching her side. "What's wrong?" I asked, kneeling beside her. She shook her head. "Just a twist. I'm fine." But she wasn't. By noon she was fevered, her skin pale and slick with sweat. I carried her inside and cooled her head with rags. She moaned in her sleep, her hands grasping at nothing. I sat beside her all night whispering stories I hadn't told in years, about my father's mule, about a lightning storm that split a tree in half, about the way she first looked at me when I said her heart was all I needed. By dawn, the fever broke. She opened her eyes and looked at me like I was something worth keeping. "I dreamed I was holding a baby," she whispered. "Yours?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, yours." That was when I knew. She carried things heavier than children ever could. Regret, love, fear, hope, hope. She carried me. The fever left her slow, but she came back in pieces. A smile here, a smart remark there, a hand that lingered longer on my arm. We built a porch swing that summer, sat on it most evenings, letting the silence stretch out between us like a comforter. One night I reached into my pocket and pulled out a ring, not gold, not even silver, just iron hammered flat and bent into a circle. She looked at it for a long time. "You asking me something?" she said. "I'm asking you everything," I replied. She took it, slid it on her finger, then said, "All right, but I get the warm side of the bed." We didn't tell the town, didn't see the point. No preacher would have blessed it. No paper would have made it truer. But something changed after that. She stood taller in town, spoke louder. When we walked into the trading post together, folks didn't whisper as much, and when they did, I stared them down until their eyes found the floor. We were building something. No children, no legacy, but something real. That fall, we took in a boy. Didn't plan on it, just found him on the edge of our property one morning, half-starved and skittish as a coyote pup. Said his name was Samuel, 12 years old. Parents died of fever, hadn't eaten in days. I looked at Ruth, she looked at me. Then she knelt down and said, "You like bread?" He nodded. "Good. I burn it sometimes, but you'll get used to it, dressed in dogo toot." He stayed. And something in Ruth healed that day. Not her body, her soul. She started singing when she cooked. And when Samuel asked why the little wooden box on the shelf stayed empty, she said, "Because sometimes hope is enough." The trouble came back in spring, same as weeds. It had been almost a year since Ruth moved in, since we found that rhythm folks spend a lifetime chasing. Samuel had grown stronger, taller, his eyes brighter now than the half-feral thing we'd found near the woods. Ruth doted on him in her quiet way, never smothering, never soft. She gave him structure, dignity, a sense of place. He called her Ruth at first. Then one day, without thinking, he called her Ma. She didn't correct him. But not everyone was so easy to win over. The Moore family hadn't forgotten, and neither had the preacher. It started with a letter nailed to our barn door. You can't lie to God. Marriage is a sacred bond, not a backwoods agreement. Your example shames this territory. No name. But I knew the handwriting. Preacher Carrick liked the way his G's curled like they knew better than you. Ruth read it once, then burned it in the stove without a word. Samuel asked what it was. A reminder that cowards use nails and wood when they don't have the guts to knock, I said. The next Sunday, Carrick showed up again, not alone this time. He brought 4 men with him, townsfolk I recognized, including Wallace Moore himself, graying, barrel-chested, and still carrying the look of a man who'd rather break a horse than understand it. They stood just beyond our fence like buzzards who'd read the wrong scripture. I met them halfway, rifle across my back, but hands empty. Carrick spoke first. "We've come for a reckoning, Eli." I raised a brow. "Reckoning tends to involve fire or rope. You bringing either?" "No," Carrick said. "We're bringing truth. Ruth has no rightful claim to this land, to this child, or to your name. This is a house built on lies." "She's my wife," I said. "By whose authority?" "Mine." "That's not good enough." Wallace Moore stepped forward. "The boy ain't yours either. Folks say you found him, no papers, no law, you sheltering a stray with no proof of blood." I felt something rise in me, not rage, not even anger. It was older than that, like dust in my bones. I turned toward the cabin. Ruth stood on the porch, Samuel behind her, both watching. Then I turned back to the men. "Let me tell you a story," I said, "about a woman who was cast out by your kind. Shamed for something her body couldn't give, as if love was measured in diapers and christenings. Then she found a man who didn't want a brood. He just wanted peace. And they made something better than blood. They made a home." Carrick stepped forward. "A home built in rebellion to God's order." "No," I said. "A home built in His image. Because if your God don't recognize love when He sees it, then maybe He ain't worth worshiping." Moore scoffed. "You think some burnt-out woman and a bastard boy can pass for a family?" I moved faster than I should have. Grabbed Moore by the collar, slammed him into the fence post so hard the boards rattled. He choked, grabbed my shirt, but I stared straight into his eyes. "If you speak her name again without respect, I'll show you just how much this bastard boy's father taught him." The other men started forward, but Carrick raised a hand. "Enough," he said. "We've seen all we need." He pulled a paper from his coat and held it out. "You're summoned to court, Eli. Town wants to settle the matter." I took the paper, didn't read it. "We'll be there," I said. They left in silence, but the wind felt heavier after. Inside, Ruth sat by the fire, eyes closed. "They won't take him," she said. "I know. All J are part of years of jail. But if they try, they won't." The courtroom wasn't much, just a converted church hall with dusty pews and a bench that creaked when the judge sat. The town came out in full, not for justice, but for the show. People love watching decency put on trial. The case was simple on paper. They claimed Ruth had no right to guardianship. That Samuel, as an unclaimed orphan, belonged under town authority. That Ruth, being unmarried and barren, lacked the moral and legal standing to raise a child. I represented myself. Didn't need fancy words. Just told them the truth. I told them how Ruth taught Samuel to read, to work the land, to speak with dignity, how she'd given him a bed, a future, a home. I told them he hadn't cried once since the day she put a coat around his shoulders and told him, "This is yours now." And I told them if they were going to take him, they'd have to kill me first. The judge didn't smile, but his fingers tapped the bench like he'd heard enough sermons from men like Carrick. He ruled in our favor. Outside the hall, folks whispered, some in support, some still clinging to tradition like it was a drowning rope. But one voice rose clear. "Samuel." He grabbed Ruth's hand and said, loud enough for all to hear, "She's my ma. She always was." And Ruth, tough, quiet Ruth, knelt down, cupped his face, and kissed his forehead. I don't know who cried first, but it wasn't just us. That night, the cabin felt warmer, like the walls themselves breathed easier. And Ruth, who once said she wasn't made to be a mother, tucked Samuel in, sat on the edge of his bed, and told him a story about a little wooden box on a shelf that didn't need to be filled. Because sometimes hope is what you make of it, and sometimes the family you choose is louder than blood. Years passed the way rivers run, slow up top, fast underneath. Samuel grew into his bones. By 17, he was taller than me, stronger too, though he still let me win when we split logs or wrestled fence posts into place. Ruth watched him like a woman who had never asked for a son but somehow ended up raising a king. She never called herself his mother. Didn't have to. He called her Ma with the same reverence folks reserve for prayers. She built more shelves, pickled more jars, added a second box beside the first, smaller, carved with her initials. I asked once what it was for. She said, "Memories." She never explained further. We had good seasons, dry ones too. Once a fire swept close to the North Ridge, and Samuel beat it back with a wet sack and a look in his eye that told me I'd passed on more than my boots. He could have left a dozen times, gone to town, joined a cattle drive, chased something louder than us, but he stayed, not out of obligation, out of choice. That's what Ruth gave him, and me too, I reckon. I wish I could tell you Ruth lived to see him married, or that she got to rock a grandchild on that porch swing she built from salvaged oak. But the world don't always offer full circles. The sickness came in quiet, no fever, no cough, just a slow fading like wind going still. She started waking later, stopped humming in the mornings. Her hands, once so steady, shook when she poured coffee. "I'm just tired," she said, brushing it off. But tired never looked that thin. I took her to Doc Avery. He listened, prodded, frowned in that way doctors do when they already know, but wish they didn't. He called it wasting sickness, said it was inside her bones, said there wasn't anything to be done. She nodded once and asked, "How long?" Could be months, could be less. She didn't cry, didn't even flinch. On the ride home, she held my hand. "You okay?" I asked. "I was supposed to die a long time ago," she said, "back when they threw me out, when I was sleeping in broken wagons and eating frostbitten apples. But I didn't. I found you, found him." She squeezed my fingers. "Yeah, that's enough." I built her a bed by the window. She asked me to keep the door open so she could hear the wind. I read to her most nights, even when her eyes stayed closed. She said my voice helped her sleep. Samuel took to chores like he was born to it. Didn't complain, didn't break, but I heard him cry once, behind the barn, his fists clenched at the sky like it had failed him. "Ruth didn't want a funeral." "I've had enough people judging my life," she said. "Don't need them judging my death." She asked to be buried near the cottonwood, the one that creaked in winter and held the swing we both loved. When the time came, she didn't struggle, didn't beg. She just slipped away like a candle burning its last drop of wax. I sat beside her body for a long time. Samuel came in, saw me there, and didn't speak. He just knelt, held her hand. We buried her with the wooden boxes, both of them, one full of old trinkets, a lock of Samuel's baby hair, a smooth stone from our first summer walk, a page torn from the Bible with my name and hers written in her careful hand. The other box, the one labeled Hope, was still empty, but I knew that was the point. Hope isn't what you fill, it's what keeps the space open. After the service, just me, Samuel, and the wind, we sat on the porch swing. The sky was soft with dusk, and the world felt quieter without her in it. "You think she knew?" he asked. "Knew what?" "That she was the best thing to happen to either of us." I smiled. "She didn't need to know," I said. "She lived it." Samuel left the ranch 3 months later, headed east to learn blacksmithing from an old friend of mine. Said he'd be back, though. Said the land still felt like home. It does to me, too. Every morning I sit on the porch with a tin cup and listen to the creek, weak as it is. I talk to her sometimes, not out loud, just in the quiet space where her voice used to live. And sometimes, when the wind kicks up and brushes past my shoulder, I swear she's still there, correcting my grammar, judging my coffee, reminding me that we never needed a cradle to raise something good. People think love's about what you get. Ruth taught me it's about what you give. She couldn't give me children, so she gave me her heart. And it was more than enough.